Welcome to the Fantasy NASCAR Podcast, Michigan Xfinity Series, Saturday morning, August 17th. There are many unknowns heading into this Xfinity race. Before we tackle those unknowns, remember, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, if you want to get access to the Fantasy NASCAR Spreadsheet for this weekend or for the month of August, I appreciate your support. Thank you. Links are in the description below. Now to the, remember, you can always get that lap-by-lap data. Speaking of unknowns, but as you analyze that data, you may come away with the belief that, boy, these cars seem awfully the same. And that's true. We are approaching this like a plate race with a major asterisk. It is not Daytona, it's not Talladega. It may not even be Atlanta. But when we look at the spectrum of racing, it may not be on the extreme end with Michigan or with Daytona and Talladega. It may not even be as far out as Atlanta, but this is clearly not your regular Michigan intermediate track race, or at least that's the way that it appears going through practice. At least that's the way that it appears according to the broadcasters. And with your own eyes, you could see the cars were not separating. Now, that being said, as we approach it as a plate race, we have to look at that asterisk, that caveat, and that is a big one. And that big one is that whereas at Daytona and Talladega, and maybe to a lesser extent Atlanta, as they're plate races, everyone's got a shot. Everyone does not appear to have a shot at Michigan. There appears to be a clear division between the haves and the have-nots. Although they have dialed these engines down from 190 miles per hour to 170 miles per hour, the people in the back still are not reaching 170 miles per hour consistently. Now, the data can be slightly misleading because there was quite a bit of pack racing and guys benefiting from the speed of the draft. But even with that, if we look at the overall data, it does appear that the Lemons class, the C class, the backpack, the back markers aren't going to get a top 10. If we envision this race with a typical plate race finish, possibly a caution at the end, and we run a green-white checker, even in that scenario, if one of these back markers is still on the lead lap, once they drop the green flag, it is hard to imagine that they're going to be able to make hay because they simply do not have quite the power, and this isn't completely a Daytona or Talladega freight train type of run that you can make. That's my belief. Again, a lot of unknowns going to Michigan. I find it hard to imagine that the back markers can top 10, whereas they can at those other plate tracks. Now, that being said, there are some people in the back that are better than others and aren't necessarily back markers. Also, along those lines, you can make an argument that if we are looking at the back markers, we're looking at the backpack, any of one of them can win that class. Any of these C-class drivers starting in the back can win that class and get as high as 20th, maybe 18th or 19th. And that might be enough. There really are two blankets in this race. You can throw a blanket over the back markers and make a good case for any of them to win the class, except for maybe Emmerling and Gase and some of the cars that just routinely don't finish much better than 30th. They're routinely not that fast and appear that they haven't really even benefited from the dialed down engine. That's one blanket. The more confusing blanket is going to be the one where you spin. And the top 15, the top tier cars, all seem pretty similar. There appears to be a lot of parity. Not much difference. The engines have equalized them. The style of racing now at this track has equalized many of these cars. We could see a follow the leader situation. The first and easiest way to approach this is to understand that all of them can win. And however you project them, as conservatively, liberally as you'd like, you want to be aggressive and say, yeah, any of them can win. That is fine. You want to say any of them can win or top 5, that is fine. So if that is the case, hog points aside, which we'll talk about in a second, if we think they all can get up into the top 5 and possibly win, then it simply appears to be a matter of chasing the maximized place differential. So getting the quality cars starting furthest back. as we do often at a super speedway. Now, back to the more challenging conversation of hog points or dominator points. Who's going to lead a bunch of laps? We saw Jesse Love do a lot of that at Atlanta. We've seen Austin Hill do a lot of that at other super speedways. That being said, RCR wasn't super pumped about their engines and their cars on track compared to others. I'm not going to worry about that too much. And it appears that Love wasn't that great. And it appears that Austin Hill wasn't that great, which is a little disappointing based on the expectations. They are pretty good super speedway racers. But then again, there are changes this weekend. Just because they have a pretty good super speedway setup at real super speedways doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen at Michigan. But that also doesn't mean that they're not going to figure it out at Michigan. Maybe they just put too much into the car, too much downforce, didn't trim it out enough. Maybe they will race better. Either way, there's plenty of time for Austin Hill to make adjustments. And ultimately, I don't think his times look that bad in practice, as you can see on the screen. Maybe they just didn't get the qualifying setup they needed. So as we look at these guys up front and we talk about hog points or dominators, it beats me. We could see a race where Creed goes out there and runs all front all day because you can't pass. And it's a drafting single file line. But if it could be Creed, it could be Herbst if he gets a push. I mean, it could be Gray. No one really wants to go to Gray because you want to feel confident in the drivers, the teams that are always here. But it's not unbelievable. Did you really think that Jesse Love was going to lead all of those Atlanta laps? Yes, RCR's been good. Yes, he had been good in the first Daytona race. But did you really want to click that button? No, but he did it. Did you want to click the button on Taylor Gray? No, but he could do it. Obviously, we're going to need the guy that leads the most laps. We can't just simply chase place differential. One of these drivers is going to win and tack on at least 20 hog points. And that's pretty much more than any of our place differential chases. We can pick some place differential guys at top 10 and win 15, 20. But if a guy leads 20 hog points worth, 30 hog points worth, finishes in the top 5, it's going to be in that optimal lineup. And you can't really look at the practice times because it's semi-plate race. But you can if you want. And you can look at their past track history. It really is going to be up to you who you feel most comfortable and what data set you want to look at. You want to look at Atlanta, Daytona, Talladega, and we see where guys have been driving, mainly during intermediate tracks. You just want to trust your instincts and pick the drivers that you know are good drivers and hope that they get out front. But this isn't your typical intermediate track race where we know who's really, really good, who's been running really, really well at those tracks, and who posted really fast times. We don't know how that's going to work. We don't know how pit cycling is going to work. We don't know how that stage 3 is going to roll out if they run green and start running out of gas. So that is the long way of saying it's hard to feel confident about any of your hog picks. And if that's the approach for most people, then they're going to jam a little bit more towards the place differential and get some heavy ownership on, obviously, at Justin Allgaier starting 16th. Wallace Allen's had a really good week and taking over that 15 car. But I don't know if I really need to go there or take that risk. Do I really believe that he's going to get in the top 10 in his first Xfinity race? He looked decent in practice. Qualified well, but I think that's a little bit too far. Pretty cool, though, to see the 15 car getting back to where it needs to be, but it also seems to be like another strike against Haley Deegan when Wallace Allen is looking good in practice. What are you going to do? Sammy Smith, AJ Allmendinger, even Noah Gragson. The Rhett Jones Racing car is, for all intents and purposes, an SHR Ford Xfinity Series ride. In the past, we had seen SHR work with Bobby Dotter, including Briscoe or Custer years ago in rides. Now it appears that Rhett Jones is their go-to, and Gragson has been good, not great, but good in his limited races. he gets the most out of it. SA Chart's putting a pretty good boost to them, but still it is Rhett Jones Racing running part-time. You can't ask too much for them, but they've gotten the most out of it. And in this style of race, there is a bit of a why not, but he's not that cheap. And he's not maximizing place differential like Justin Allgaier, so you don't necessarily have to go there. You feel much more comfortable with Mr. DNF, Sam Mayer. Maybe. Nemechek could easily get up front and lead laps, and he's going to throw 9 place differential on there. We also have the fact that if this does play out like Atlanta and there's a little bit of drafting, then you're going to see fast laps spread throughout. If you look at the last Atlanta race and you see that Jesse Love leads all these laps, he runs very few fast laps. Fast laps go to the pack. Now, how much of a pack is this going to be? It remains to be seen. We could be completely wrong. The leader could also double up with fast lap points. That's an unknown. But I would expect there still to be some fast laps being spread throughout the field to a certain extent. Quite possibly, at least from what we had seen in practice. And if that's the case, Nemechek doesn't even nearly need to get out to the lead. They say that for Allgaier too. Give him 14, 13 place differential points. Give him 5 fast lap points because he's running in the pack. It's 21, top 5. Seems very possible, highly probable. Obviously, we don't want him to wreck, but if he doesn't wreck, it would appear that he should be able to move his way through. So let's identify quickly some of these better cars that we expect to be place differential heroes. And this is not much different than the way we approach plate tracks. Nemechek, it's fine. Mayer's fine. As you get deeper, it gets a little bit more, okay, I can do this. I would not rule out Noah Gragson. Maybe people aren't really diving into Rhett Jones Racing. Maybe you can get a little bit of ownership boost your way. But in the end, I'm not really worried about ownership because ownership's not going to determine where the guy finishes. I don't know if you got to get that weird. You just need to be able to predict first who's going to lead the most laps. That's going to be challenging enough for people. And then probably taking a second driver that's possibly going to lead laps and finish well. Then you can chase place differential. That's where some of the picks might bunch up. But then the value is going to be pretty random. So again, I don't know if ownership's really going to be something that you have to worry about because ownership of that 5th or 6th pick in the value range could be a handful of jokers in the back. Sure, picks like 2, 3, 4 or 3, 4, 5 are going to gobble up a lot of the same guys starting here in the teens. But then when we look at the top guys who lead laps and they're hogs, there's 10 drivers that could possibly do that. And that should spread ownership all over the place anyway. So again, I'm not a big fan of ownership determining you picking who's going to win races because it doesn't. But even if you are a big ownership fan, I just don't see a case where everyone's going to end up with similar lineups. Given that anyone can lead laps, given that anyone in the back can have a decent day. There isn't a clear value pick that says this is the guy that we're all going to go to. Now, I haven't built too many lineups. There could be some popular guys in the back, but it doesn't mean the real cheapies aren't on the board. All right, so Allgaier are probably going to be super popular. And that is fine. No problem with that. Jeb Burton, Jeffrey Earnhardt. Pretty cheap. Can definitely get into the top 10. And that's about it. Do I really want Jeffrey Earnhardt? Probably not. Good weekend, great. Sam Hunt Racing. Maybe you get the top 10, but I don't think he's the guy. Maybe. I don't know. I want to completely eliminate him from the board. When I look at where I'm ranking him, giving him place differential and a slight boost, he's really not even a top 20 DFS point per dollar play for me. Jeb Burton, on the other hand, like the Jordan Anderson cars, typically pretty good and strong at plate type style of races. Not bad this season either. He's been a pretty good plate style racer over his career. I could see him moving a lot further than Jeff Earnhardt. And If I look at my numbers, I got him around on a point per dollar basis, one of the 11th best plays. So he is definitely up there. And I'm not really saying he's going to do that great. Gets a top 10 at his price. He might slide in there. He's definitely on the board. I would dial Alfredo down just a little bit compared to Burton, but not much. And he is more expensive. But if you are tinkering with Burton, then I think that you still need to leave Alfredo on the table right next to the marinara and the pasta. Leave it all on the table. Eat it all, whatever. But Alfredo is a slightly worse pick just because of, I think that he lacks slightly the upside and he's a little bit more expensive, but not completely untouchable. Obviously, Austin Hill is going to be very popular, maybe more so than Justin Allgaier. These are probably going to be the first names people click on, and they're going to make up the bulk of lineups. I don't mind having too much Allgaier and Hill. I can go in a different direction with the guy I think is going to lead laps if I have the money, and I can flirt with any of the Lemons class. Clements, so as we get a little further back, we have an opportunity to build more place differential, but also as we slide down this scale, we're running into drivers that aren't quite capable of that top 10. Clements isn't quite capable of that top 10. And so when I look at my projections, he's barely even a top 25 play for me. I could be surprised. I don't think I'm going to be surprised. If I'm going with some back markers, then I want to maximize place differential. I don't think he's any that much better than some of the back markers, and he has a position that just doesn't help us in DFS. Parker Kligerman should carry a healthy amount of ownership because he can top 10. I'm probably being a little conservative saying he's a top 10 driver. He may be able to push a little bit further. But even with a 10th place projection, he's barely a top 20 DFS rank. Now, again, if I rank him as top 20 point per dollar play, that's a ceiling projection. And even if the ceiling projection comes true, you do have to factor in 5 of the cars that I gave ceilings that are ranked as better point per dollar plays probably aren't going to finish. Several of them won't have good races at all. So he could easily end up being a 10th best play from 20th. But even that being the case, I don't know if I really need to go to Parker Kligerman when I think I get almost the same amount of upside with Shane Van Gisbergen and Daniel Dye. I know they're not the greatest drivers yet. Dye's improving, SVG's improving. This is a track where I don't think it's going to hurt them too much. Sure, it could be challenging for a while, but I have all the faith that they'll stay on that lead lap. I have all the faith that the matte colored cars have enough speed that they can creep towards the top 10. Maybe Kligerman has more upside if he can achieve it. But SVG and Daniel D can be right on his tail, and they're cheaper. I'd rather go in that direction if I'm looking at those drivers. Cesar Baccarella, the Logan Paul of NASCAR. It is a pretty apt comparison. He's an influencer, businessman, does all these things, involved in nutrients company. But what he does part-time is race, whereas Logan Paul wrestles. And where you're like, oh, Logan Paul. But Logan Paul is pretty dedicated and actually has become a pretty good wrestler. Baccarella is kind of dedicated. I don't think he's as good of a racer as Logan Paul has been as a wrestler. Now, if you're a WWE fan, I know it seemed like a bit of a joke, but Logan Paul's put in the work. Logan Paul puts in some pretty good matches. So, and you can do that when you only wrestle like pay-per-views. You don't have to beat up your body 7 days a week like the rest of the crew and do all the travel like the rest of the crew. But nonetheless, when the pay-per-view comes, Logan puts on a show. Baccarella maybe doesn't really put on much of a show. Either way, kind of an interesting comparison. I'm not going to him, long story short. Now, Parker Retzlaff is someone that I could consider going to. Again, a Jordan Anderson car, starting in the back, very affordable. He's had some bad luck this season, but he is a quality driver and quality equipment. Very capable of a top 15 at any racetrack. And at a racetrack that's equalized, he definitely can get top 15, maybe even top 10. If the other Anderson car is capable of creeping towards the top 10 with Jeb Burton, so is Parker Retzlaff. And he's starting deeper, and he is cheaper. I like it. You compare Retzlaff play to Kyle Sieg, I'd much rather go to Retzlaff for $100 more. This is simply more upside. Sieg's fine. Sieg's car's probably fine. But I think Retzlaff has a little bit more get up and a little bit more skill, obviously. Even that being said, given the style of racing, there's no problem with rostering both. Not as happy with Weatherman as I am to go to Retzlaff and Sieg. I just simply think that the cars are better, but I wouldn't rule him out because at the end of the day, like I said at the beginning, you can throw a blanket over pretty much any of these guys in the back. You truly can. And I would guess that Weatherman will carry the lower amount of ownership, if that matters. But again, I'm already going through 3 drivers in the 6K range that anyone can go to. So that's going to split up lineups if you are concerned. And then for not much more at 67, you get a pretty quality racer in that colored car, qualified poorly. Whether Williams is typically a top 20 driver, sometimes top 15. Now we're in a parity circumstance, which could also have wrecks. It's very easy that he could get a 15th place finish similar to Retzlaff. I would put him and Retzlaff together as the top so far, but Sieg and Weatherman are still in play. Don't really want to go to Blaine Perkins, but you're getting him a little bit cheaper. And if for whatever reason you're in a circumstance where you have to go below 6K, it's not the worst pay for Sieg, for a Sieg car. Don't really want to go there. He is on the fringe of who you can and cannot play, but he is slightly viable. Don't want to go there, but will if my hands are tied because of the price of Austin Hill and Justin Allgaier. Benedetto should carry a lot of ownership based on name, but also, again, if we believe the seat cars are fine, he's got plenty of experience. I don't know if he quite has the upside of a Parker Retzlaff or maybe even a Josh Williams, but I don't believe it's that far off. Sieg Fords, and I know this is quasi-Sieg, have been pretty solid this season. They've made solid connections with Ford, and I think that they have enough speed probably at the Ford Michigan track. So look for them to move forward, but you don't have to go to him. I think I would rather go to Retzlaff and Williams, but I will probably also have plenty of Benedetto. He's starting further back, and we don't really know how this race is going to play out. So to have any firm confidence that Retzlaff and Williams are going to finish better than Benedetto is quite foolish for me to even say. So that being the case, you may just default to, well, give me the place differential. I'm not as well. This Bobby Daughter car that Emmerling drives from week to week is usually a 29th place car. Everywhere they go. Sometimes worse. I'm not really interested. Leland Honeyman just doesn't seem to get things done. Now, 5,200, for whatever reason, if I am strapped for cash, he is starting 33rd. There could be some attrition in this race. He could hang on to the lead lap. It's not out of this world. I think I'd rather go to Balicki if I had to. But this is not Daytona or Talladega where we're jamming in these guys in the back. But this is also an intermediate track, super speedway-ish, whatever it is, that we can flirt with these drivers. If it were Texas or Kansas, and those were the times they posted in practice, yeah, we could be concerned. And we probably wouldn't want to dare go to these guys. And they would just be straight punts. But given the unknowns and the way that this race might play out, they're not pure punts. And they're not the Daytona jam in the back that's going to come through. They're somewhere in between on the spectrum. There is a bit of a heartbeat. The heart monitor is still beating, not beeping like the treadmill. They can come through, but I really would probably only want one super cheap driver. And hopefully I can build that. I can take some of the guys in the 6 range. But if I do take the one super cheap driver, there's not a lot between the difference. Perkins, Honeyman, Balicki. This car that Bearden's driving has been actually a little bit better. So I would much rather go to Bearden. I do not want to go to Patrick Emmerling. But Bearden, because of the place differential, why not? Bilicki, why not? If Perkins has a chance, Bilicki has a chance, if Bearden has a chance, Honeyman has a chance, and they can all get to 20th at least, well, then give me the guy that benefits the most in DFS from going to 20th. And that's going to be the Honeyman, Bilicki, Bearden group. Now, if we got a little bit more, we probably feel a little bit more confident in Brennan Poole. This is where you ask yourself, if you want to go through the lap-by-lap data and watch practice over and hope that you get to see some of these guys starting in the back, you say, well, what was the deal with Tommy Joe Martin's cars not posting a lot of speed, not being fast in practice? Do they approach it as if they know what's going to race? Or do they just not bring very good cars? Are we overreacting to practice at a track that might be a super speedway? There are unknowns that you can tackle and dive into. But if we admit we don't know those things, then we can just ask ourselves, how have they run for most of the season? And although Poole and Ellis may have been a little bit hotter earlier, they still are cars that at any given track can be in the top 3 in the back pack. Maybe they don't win the class this week, but a strong argument could be made that Brennan Poole, given this style of racing, regardless of what we know about his practice data, could finish 23rd. And so you say, well, but Logan Bearden can finish 20th. Yeah, but we have to run the scenarios of what if he doesn't finish 20th? And what if Poole does finish 23rd? What if Poole Bearden finishes 24th? Who's more likely to get towards the front? And given what we've seen in the past, you would probably argue it would be Poole. Probably less hot Ellis. He's been the inferior teammate. And then when I look at Gase and Baird, I think that's just too far for me. So again, if you're constructing, as we wrap up here on the Fantasy NASCAR podcast, you're probably going to have to take 2 of these drivers up in the front that are going to lead laps. It doesn't necessarily have to be up front. Maybe it's Nemechek. Maybe the guys that lead laps are down here in the teens. That would make it easy. They're going to be the most popular. I think people are going to start right here with Allgaier and Hill. Then you're going to have to say which guy's going to lead laps, but you're not. You say that's too hard right now. You're going to then go, well, let me take the next easy question. Let's start with the easy questions first before I really challenge my brain. And you're probably going to go Matt DiBenedetto. I don't think I would. I'm going to go Parker Retzlaff. And then I'll go Matt DiBenedetto. Now, I think the way that this sets up is you're going to have to go with the cheapie in order to get one more guy you think can lead laps. You can use the spreadsheet. It'll calculate all this for you. You can punch them into lineups if you have access to the Fantasy NASCAR Spreadsheet, racefortheprize.com, Venmo, PayPal, Cash App, and you can play around with these things. You can run the optimizer. You can adjust projections, see if the computer can help you make a better pick, a better selection. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you're going to have to pull the trigger, maybe pull the trigger twice on 2 of these guys. And I think if you pull the trigger twice on them, and you also want to get Allgaier and Hill, which I think is probably going to be very hard to do, but then you're going to have to go down here and throw some darts at some 5K drivers. The Honeyman, the Bilickis, the Beardens, the Pools. Hard choices to be made there. Hard choices to be made between these. And I wouldn't beat yourself up about it because we don't know with this style of racing who really is going to be the best pick. You can look at the data, you can do circles around it. Not that easy. That'll do it for me. Hopefully I gave you an idea. Again, get the spreadsheet so you can punch them in and run the calculator and start building some lineups, and you can look at the lap-by-lap data. Like, subscribe, share. Appreciate having you guys around. Have a terrific Saturday.